I want to get back to the group chat. Okay, the president is talking about holding a convention for the midterms. Isn't that going to be, with the exception of hardcore MAGAs, right, who love a Trump rally? And let's be clear, in Trump's first term, he was still doing rallies throughout his entire 4 years. He barely does them now. Because when you think about immigration, when you think about the tariffs, when you think about just the overall economy, the jobs picture, with the MAGA base cares about AI versus how the president approaches AI. I'm not sure, with the exception of the culture war stuff, what that midterm convention, I'm not sure what the focus would be, except a challenge for a lot of those candidates.
I agree. I mean, it is the Republican National Committee who's holding this midterm convention. I think what they're hoping is that just that energy from the president helps garner their base and remind their base that the Democrats have a lot of energy right now, so that they are inspired to go vote. I think one of the things that we've seen in some of the polling beyond what you said about Trump's approval numbers is that the enthusiasm gap between Democrats, likely Democratic voters versus likely Republican voters. And the Democrats have the enthusiasm. So I think they're going to try to use this to remind people what they like about President Trump. The problem is also, when you look at those polls, the independents are siding on the Democratic side right now. And I think, once again, we're going to go back to the A word. It's affordability. People can literally track the Iran war to their gas prices. People can literally track tariffs. Tariffs is a concept for CNBC. I still don't totally understand it. But what we've been told is that people on the ground attribute the tariffs, and they're like, oh, my fruit is more expensive. So they have to combat that, and they've got to figure out someone to rally around. And what the Republican Party has is someone at the center that people like rallying around on the conservative side.
Can we stay on the tariffs for just one moment? How does anyone, right, how does anyone in this administration continue to make the argument that the tariffs are paid by foreign governments when at this very moment, the U.S. government is writing checks to the tune of millions and millions of dollars to American businesses? How do they get up at a rally? How do they sit down on a TV interview? Perhaps that's why they never accept my invitations and continue to say it's those other countries.
How do they do that?
Yes.
I mean, they have had no problem basically saying anything that they wanted to say that otherwise suited them. There's just no evidence of this whatsoever. They've continued to say it, and every paper that's been written about it, every research paper says Americans are paying the tariffs. And I think it's interesting that Shauna suggests that Americans know they're paying the tariffs, because I never know how much Americans know about these topics. But it's clear they've raised prices. There have been a few people that have tried to suggest that's not the case, but it mostly doesn't hold up. Even the President Trump's new Fed chairman has acknowledged that there is a inflationary aspect to tariffs in the economy today. I keep coming to this term that I used, immaculate taxation, which is they kept thinking they could put a tax on something and it wouldn't show up in the price anyplace. Well, guess what? If you raise the tax on it, things go up. So
did you make that up?
I did make that up. Yes,
yes.
Yes, but apologies to some people of the Catholic faith who don't like that idea. But
I am Catholic, and I
you don't mind? Okay,
yes.
great. Thank you.
But they also asked for a lot of trust. I mean, that's the whole thing with this tariff regime. They said, like, look, things might be rough for a little while, but in the long term, you're going to be better off. These are the things the public is not buying anymore. Some of these polls that show Trump doesn't have our priorities as his top priority. He's not doing the things he needs to be done for us. That's what those polls show, right? It's a total polar opposite world of where Democrats are at. Democrats.
But babe, it's more than the patience, right? Like you can just take a series of video clips, whether it's Scott Bessent, Kevin Hassett, Howard Lutnick, moving the goalposts. That economy is going to be booming in the fall. It's going to be booming in the winter. It's going to be booming in the spring. The only boom we're waiting for is a potential bust in the market.
That's right. But also you have to deal with there were not going to be any new wars, and there was a new war. Like, the trust deficit that these guys are operating under is very, very large now. That's a huge problem for them, right? Democrats' problem is that they're trying to figure out, how do we fight Trump? Well, you guys don't like Trump. Some of us say, we're going to fight just him, but not really rock the boat that much. Some are saying we're going to rock the boat a ton and fight him at the same time. Republicans are having to say, we like him, and we're going to stick with this kind of as much as we can. It's a very, very tough position for them to be in. And the idea they're having this convention, a few months ago, I talked to some Republican strategists, and they were talking about how their plan for the fall was to go back to those low propensity voters that they used in 2024, go out there and pull them out. They have the machinery to pull them out now.
And the money.
But that requires your base showing up. And if that base enthusiasm is down, then low propensity voters are not going to save you from that.
By the way, that's one of the biggest shifts in politics in the last 10 years. The movement of the low propensity voter from Democrats to Republicans. They got the low propensity voter. Now that it's their problem to get them out to the polls. That
is interesting. Okay, we just got a new joint statement from Thom Tillis and John Cornyn saying, quote, "We want to express our gratitude to Mr. Blanche," we're talking about Todd Blanche and his staff, "for working with us on this, and we look forward to voting to advance his nomination out of the Senate Judiciary Committee soon." Okay, Chris Jansing, I want to ask you about this. So Todd Blanche is going to get his wish. Donald Trump is going to get his wish. They sort of carved out in his so-called anti-weaponization fund that there's not going to be this $1.776 billion that's going to be carved out. However, does this not run the risk that this will turn around and quickly become an ad for Democrats, right? The IRS provision that will still exist for Donald Trump and his business and his two eldest sons. Okay, Donald Trump made what we think is anywhere between $2 and $3 billion in the last year or so. He could end up with $500 million plus in savings if he's not paying anything on this, which we don't know. But if he has this protection around him, I can't imagine the American people, if it's explained to them, are going to be down with that.
And I'm not even sure that they need to have it explained to them in that detail, although I agree with you, Stephanie, it's going to end up in ads. But I'm surprised, or maybe I shouldn't be, by how many people I talk to. And I'm not just talking about here in Michigan. I've been to 5 or 6 battleground states over the course of the last month or so, who use the word grift. And they were fired up about this fund. Believe me, without asking them, this would come up in conversation. But I think the idea that somehow they connect all of this money with what they're not getting, that the rich are getting richer. That's exactly the message that we're hearing from so many of the candidates, not just progressives, but Democratic candidates writ large, that I think we've come to a point where people are just done with it. And I'll also say this. They are tired of time and attention being spent on issues like this that they don't think deserve the attention. They want the issues to be back once again to how are you going to make me have a better life, put food on the table, be able to afford my rent, be able for my kid to think at one day maybe he'll be able or she'll be able to own a home, not be talking about this other stuff and acting like you've somehow won a victory.